I am joined today by my friend Adam. Hello.
How you doing, Andy?
I'm fine. I think better than you with time changes today.
Yes, the darn time it keeps changing, and in America it's spring forward, which means we're in daylight savings time now, which means the sun is up an hour later. Well, of course, the sun is not up an hour later. We're not changing the trajectory of planets,
No.
but the way we reckon time changes, and there are a lot of people who are really sick of it. It's like, why don't we? Can we just do one or the other?
Well,
It doesn't make much sense.
you go back how many hundreds of years they didn't have time zones and they
Right.
seem to do okay.
They
Finding
did
new
okay.
worlds, creating
Yeah,
the wheel, fire, they seem to manage.
right.
And
It
look at
was
how little we can
all
do now.
okay. I know, right? So it takes everybody's bodies a week to catch up with losing an hour of sleep. So spring forward, we hate. Fall back, I like fall back because I get another hour. But
I just think they call it fall over either way.
exactly,
Makes more
exactly.
sense to me. But we're not here to talk about time zones, although, hey, that's an
We're
interesting
not.
part of life, which is
It
part of
is
everything
interesting,
else.
right?
Where would you like to start us off today?
Let's start off with the first of two movies coming up in the next 3 weeks with the same title, which makes me wonder sometimes if marketers are actually doing their homework. But it is germane to this conversation because that title is The Last Supper. There is a new movie out in theaters that obviously is focusing on the life of Jesus. And this one is just The Last Supper. The one that comes out in 2 weeks is The Chosen, The Last Supper. So, if you want to pit Nicks with me, we could say that they're not technically exactly the same title. But I think it will be confusing for people because they're going to use that shorthand. And as the title implies, this is a movie that focuses on, the end of Jesus' ministry and his crucifixion and resurrection. And I'm of multiple minds on this movie, Andy. I think as Christian movies about Jesus go, it's fine. It's not terrible. It's not one that leaves me absolutely wowed. It is just sort of right down the middle. Now, having said that, I think that when we start talking about all of the different movies that try to deal with the biblical story of Jesus, um, the interesting conversation is to begin to look for what differentiates them, right? The Jesus movie that Campus Crusade or now Crew did, back in the 70s, it's been seen by hundreds of millions of people. It's a faithful using scripture depiction. And if you want to do, you can go down the list, right? The Last Temptation of Christ is one that most people aren't going to watch because, well, it's got a lot of stuff in it. Or Jesus of Nazareth, his eyes always look glassy because he never blinks. If you want to play a fun game, try to catch Jesus blinking in that movie. And this one, I think the interesting thing is the way that it deals with Caiaphas and Judas, who are both kind of the villains of the story, obviously. And it, as these movies all do, it imagines motivations, it imagines thoughts, it imagines what might have been going on behind the scenes with them. And that's kind of interesting, to just as a thought experiment, kind of put yourself in the middle of it and say, these guys are clearly not in the right position when we read their story, but what were they thinking? What was going on in the moment? So I would say that is what this film does, maybe better than some. There's some three-dimensional complexity to their characters that is interesting from a movie watching point of view.
So is that released cinemas worldwide, or is that America for the moment?
You know, I was thinking it was worldwide, but I may be off on that if you're not seeing it listed in your area.
Okie
Your
dokie.
area being not my area. So, um, is that one that you're not seeing around?
No, I don't know. I'm not
Okay.
brilliant. That's why I
Yeah.
rely upon you and other people.
Right. Well, and I need to like check my British release dates before we have these conversations. One that I think will be in your area. Well, let me just stop there. Do you have a favorite Jesus movie, Andy?
No, not really. Not
Okay.
a massive fan because I kind of think unless it's like proper as the Bible things. I just think, oh, I start to cringe. Where are we going to go here? And is it going to be
Right?
really good? So it's one of those where I really struggle. I like that people have tried to do stuff because as a Christian, I think it's great. Let's do movies about Jesus. It's
Yep.
the best action stories ever. But
Yeah.
when people do it, they never do it. Do you know what I mean? They sort of take, well, we
Right.
like this bit and we like this bit, but we'll get rid of that bit that's the really good part that we'll get rid of because
Right.
it's not so gritty. And how do we do a sex scene if that's gonna? It's that kind of thing that really bugs me. But that's not in the Bible.
Right. Right. And virtually anything from the Old Testament, it would all be with the American rating system. It's all rated R, right? You've got a lot of things happening that aren't very nice. So certainly, I think different people are going to respond to it differently. But I was just curious
Yeah,
your perspective on it.
I have an interesting perspective in that I would love to watch a film which is fake. I get annoyed with anything that doesn't follow the book of the film. I got annoyed
Yeah.
with the Chronicles of Narnia, thinking that's not
Oh
in there,
yeah.
or Bombadil in the Lord of the Rings. I think one of the most
Right? What
brilliant
happened to
characters.
Tom Bombadil?
Exactly, but I
Come
get
on.
really irked when I watch a film or read a book, whichever way around it is, doesn't matter, and think that's not in there. And you can understand some of it because they're trying to tell a story, right? They want to get from the start
Right.
to the end, and some things don't necessarily add to the story in the same way. But other times, I'm just thinking, I don't think this is a personal thing. I think this is really dumb. Like, where is it? This is central. So I get even more finicky when it comes to anything to do with the Bible.
Well, let's shift gears then to another story that if you've read the book, you're not going to like the movie either. And I think this is playing in your neck of the woods because it's on Netflix and it's The Electric State. Have you heard about this movie?
I've heard
It's
of
had
it. That's all I know.
quite a bit of buzz because it stars Millie Bobby Brown, who is like, short of Taylor Swift, the biggest young female entertainer on earth, it seems like right now. She has parlayed her Stranger Things fame into quite a burgeoning young acting career. The Electric State is actually based on a book of the same name, and it imagines a world in which robots and humans have gone to war with each other. That's an original one. We've never seen that before.
Nuts, completely brand new, revolutionary.
It's brand new and revolutionary. And there's been, sort of a apocalypse. So it's sort of a dystopian-ish movie. And a robot ends up tracking her down, and it appears to be the consciousness or spirit of her brother, who she thought was dead. And the robot sort of convinces her that maybe her brother is still alive, and they go off on an adventure to try to find her brother. Um, and, action, violence, all, robot versus human things, all of that ensues in, as dystopian movies of this ilk go. It's a fine movie, right? And it is one that has PG-13 in the US levels of content. Probably the violence and a bit of profanity are the biggest things people are going to want to be aware of here. Neither one of those are crazy over the top. And a lot of the violence is actually robots fighting drones and that sort of thing. But it begs some interesting questions. Can robots have souls? I would think we would say no, they can't because they're not creatures created in God's image as humans are. But I think on the plus side, it kind of critiques our engagement with entertainment, with screens, and consumerism, and because you have this sort of zombified human existence of people who just want to escape into their technology. So interesting stuff. Maybe the most interesting thing is that the cast list is kind of crazy. Millie Bobby Brown, Chris Pratt, Anthony Mackie, Stanley Tucci, and it just goes on and on and on. Jason Alexander, a lot of people in this movie. So I'm sure that Netflix is hoping it does well.
That's what I've seen with the Marvel. That what did we watch the other night as a family? It's family night. Thor Ragnarok,
Oh yeah,
which is actually a very funny film. But we're
it's a
watching it.
really entertaining movie for a movie about the Norse end of the world. It's
Well,
super fun.
exactly. But there's a moment where you see Matt Damon's making a quick cameo in the background, and you're thinking, is that That's Matt Damon.
It's Matt
Okay. And
Damon.
then you got obviously Thor himself, but the actor's brother was one of the other characters, and you're thinking, what? What's going on? It was a very funny film. But you are looking at the list of actors and thinking, what is your budget for this? That's got to be
Right?
serious coin there. That's
It's a
big.
lot of coin. That's exactly right.
But a funny film. Anyway, I don't do the reviews.
Yep.
What else have we got? Music, books, games. Where else can we go?
Let's talk about a YouTube channel called Jet Lag. And it's actually called, the full title is Jet Lag the Game. And I don't know if you have the show The Amazing Race on over there, where it's a reality show where people have to compete in a competition to find stuff and they travel from country to country. This is a YouTube channel that kind of does something really similar, and they play different games, but they're games on like a really, really, really big playing board. So they play Connect Four, but they're trying to score four US states in a straight line, claiming them by visiting the
Okay.
state capital, that sort of thing. They've played tag across Europe, hide and seek in Switzerland. They've engaged in capture the flag in Japan. So pretty fun. And if it feels like there's a but coming, unfortunately there is. The but here is just language. There's a fair bit of that, and I think it takes something that otherwise is super fun and at least forces us to add that caveat, right? It's like, oh, I could have done without that. If we could have gotten the broadcast TV version of this, I think it would have been more accessible. So I don't know. It feels like something inspired by The Amazing Race, that some really creative young guys playing these games all over the world. But again, that language might be enough to say, yeah, my family's going to take a pass on that one.
Which is why I love Plugged In. I did modify a version of Australia that we bought as a DVD, and I adapted it so my boys could watch it. I've done the same with Pearl Harbor, and I
Yep.
cut out on average maybe 6, 7 seconds of the film. My boys
Yep.
didn't notice. I noticed because I thought, I didn't have that stuff in the middle. It made
Right.
no difference to the storyline whatsoever. And when I sort of very quickly asked the boys afterwards, they knew exactly what was going on between relationships. Only we have none of the nasty stuff that we actually don't want to see, don't need to see, that
Right.
doesn't add to the story, which does bug me when you hear directors and producers talking about we want the flow, we want the story, we got rid of this character who doesn't add. And I think, well, that didn't add nothing either. So you could have got rid
Right.
of that because that did nothing to the film apart from ruin it.
Right. And that's, the question that we're faced with as people thinking about movies, and that directors and producers are faced with as they make movies, is what are the elements that are really necessary to tell the story? And obviously at Pure 24/7 Radio, we're actually looking for alternatives that are not just completely bathed in dreck,
Yeah.
right? That you can watch without it necessarily being horrible. And at Plugged In, we want to sort of give you the information so that you can make a good decision for yourself. Because sometimes you get into something like, oh, this looks really promising. Oh,
Yeah.
maybe not.
I think we read a plugged in review on, was it the Jack Ryan series when it first began?
Oh yeah,
And it was, well, so far, episode one, basically okay. Couple of
right,
things. We watched episode two without checking to see where it was at. And I thought,
right.
oh my goodness. And we turned it off
Oh
and
my
never watched it
goodness.
again because this thing happened. And you're thinking, what? Yeah, what?
Right. And it's a Tom Clancy character.
Yep.
And if you read any of the original Tom Clancy,
All of them.
when it first showed up, I mean, Hunt for Red October came out in 1984, and Red Storm Rising, and it went on from there, espionage, 80s Cold War stuff. These stories were not about sex
Not
at
even
all.
close.
Not even close. They're about submarines and technology, and
Yep.
everything I know about modern warfare, I know because of Tom Clancy. So,
Yeah, me too.
uh, I felt like the Jack Ryan series was an utter disappointment for exactly that reason.
It had hope. I mean, again, on Pure, we love decent music. We got, some older school bands, big bands, Led Zeppelin,
Yep.
Hush, Cream. We got some really good old steel bands, Eurythmics and Annie Lennox and stuff. But then you look at the more modern stuff, and this is not a young, old generational thing. This is
Right.
we don't need that stuff in the song or the film because it's not actually adding. So if I hear a song like on a national radio station and every
Yeah.
fourth word is beeped out because it's offensive, I
Right.
turn off for the simple
Right.
reason that, do you know what? That beep is not musical. And they've only
Right.
put that in there because you couldn't be bothered to write some better lyrics, is my own personal opinion on that one. It's like just Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Compare
I mean,
that to
come on.
anything modern.
Just put it on repeat and listen for the next 12 hours,
That'll
right?
do me. Or Led Zeppelin. It's fine. But this is the thing we're talking about, isn't it? There's a lot of stuff that was less of a problem going back even 15, 20 years. Whereas
Yeah.
now we have to be so much more careful. And I think it's because of what we now accept as, well, that's okay.
Right. Well,
It's
and
not.
that gets one of the bigger things that we try to deal with at Plugged In is the bigger conversation about worldview, right? Obviously, we want to let you know if there's a racy scene or if there's a ton of language, sort of that content evaluation. But the bigger questions that we're grappling with are what's the worldview here? Because you can watch something that doesn't have massive content issues that still has huge philosophical issues. And I think that worldview really gets at the questions of what's right, what's good, what's normal, what's to be praised, what's not normal, what do we want to censure, right? And everything that we watch and engage with has a worldview. It may be a benign worldview, it may be innocuous, but it has one. And so we want to really equip people to think critically and biblically about worldview because those ideas they get in there and they shape how we see the world. And if we're not being really wise and intentional about the way we engage with entertainment, we may be unintentionally influenced in ways that we're not even really conscious of, Andy.
Which is why we like Plugged In, because we can at least be forewarned, which I think is
Yes.
brilliant. I
Yep.
wish I could have read the review on Plugged In about Jack Ryan episode 2 because we wouldn't have bothered
Right.
watching episode 1. And it had
Yep.
such promise. I love the Jack
Yeah.
Ryan character, but it was just, why did you have to do that? That's got nothing at all to do with Jack Ryan
No,
whatsoever.
nothing at all.
Which
Nothing
really
at all.
bugs me. Right, Adam, thank you. A little bit of an Andy B rant today,
No
which does
worries.
happen from time to time. I have thoughts. If you want to find out more about Plugged In, where should we go, sir?
You can come to pluggedin.com, and we are a ministry of focus on the family.
Thanks so much.
You bet. Thank you, Andy.